Thank you again for being here today for our jurors and artist talks. We're excited to have Jean McLaughlin here with us, traveling all the way from North Carolina. We always appreciate all the efforts people make traveling such a long distance, as well as all the artists that are here from all over the United States as well as abroad. Jean McLaughlin, I'll give you a little bit of background on her, was former director of North Carolina's Penland School of Craft. She's a BFA in Studio Art from UNC Chapel Hill and a Master's in Liberal Arts from North Carolina State University. She's a member of the Mica Gallery, cooperative in Bakersfield, North Carolina, and is currently on the boards of the Community Foundation of Western North Carolina, UNC School of the Arts, and Wild Acres Retreat. She's a lifelong advocate of the arts and is currently exploring her own voice and giving back as a volunteer. We're delighted to have Jean with us today, and she's going to be leading the artist talks. And let's give Jean a warm welcome.
You know, I just want to say thank you again for this opportunity. It's really wonderful to see you. I imagine many of you are artists and we'll hear from you, who have been part of the show, or artists who live in the community. Some of you may be the supporters of the institution and just love craft and that you're here. This is a wonderful institution, and it has been just so great to be here and to work with both Nancy and Pam. They guided me through this process beautifully. They're so well organized, and it's just been a delight. As you were hearing about my background, I studied art, but then back in the 1970s, it was, in some ways, maybe it was my personality, but it seemed a lot less easy to find joint studio space at that point in time. So I kind of left printmaking behind, and I got involved in nonprofit arts management. But in the back of my mind, I was always going to make art, so I had to stay healthy so I could retire and then make art. So my last 5 years have been in such a thrilling, absorbing way, becoming a beginner again. So I'm speaking to you now more out of the years that I spent looking at art and helping other artists make art, even though it feels kind of awkward because I have truly stepped out of that role and moved into being a beginner maker myself. But anyway, thank you, Pam and Nancy, for inviting me here. It's just been truly a pleasure. They gave me complete freedom to use my own criteria for selecting this show. They reminded me that I could only choose 90 pieces. And now that I'm in here, I realize why. That was quite hard. There were close to 500 pieces that I was looking at. And I have to say that generally, when I review residency applications or scholarships or fellowships or any of the ways that I'm reviewing work, I could eliminate half of them pretty fast. That's a terrible thing to say out loud, but that's what I did. And this time I could not. The work that's submitted to this show was outstanding. And I just had to look at them and look at them and look at them over and over again to decide what was going to be in this show. Now, when you're curating a show, or when I would be curating a show, generally I would have a theme of some kind. I would have some message that I wanted to convey, and then all the works would fit into that concept. That's not what this was about for me. I think that I could have, because out of those 500 entries, there were great examples of several different themes that could have been, and could still be, pulled together to create exhibitions. But in this case, what I wanted to do was show this community as many different ways of working in craft media as were among the applicants. So I was sort of creating these different sortings of the kind of work that was being presented, and then sharing with you a wide range of the way people make art and in craft media. So I wanted to say that I'm going to shift down here to my notes. So you can see works here that respond deeply to craft and decorative art traditions, and others that speak in relation to painting, sculpture, photography, and performance. Like this to me is like a performance piece. The glass horn headpiece is part of a performance piece. So there's this range of ways that people are making art and using craft material, craft history, craft traditions, but moving it into or reflecting and responding to the way that our current art world is working with painting, sculpture, and other media. I love expert manipulation of materials and craftsmanship, intentional choices of materials to convey meaning. So I hope as you're looking at this show, you will be thinking about that in the back of your mind. I think that that would be true of the pieces that are chosen here. The show includes inventiveness and skill, works that are quirky, ones that are elegant, poignant, evocative, and personal, and all that are deeply engaging. There are influences of cultural histories and statements of social justice and environmental awareness, evidence of research as methodology. Some of the works focus more on design, some more on concept, some on materiality and process. Some are totally, intentionally unuseful, and others are entirely practical. Some are humorous, and some are needfully humorless. None can escape objectness and tactility, regardless of concept. And therein you have my thesis on craft. When I look at paintings and sculpture and photography, when I'm in like museums and galleries, or even the decorative arts, I do not want to investigate how they are made. It doesn't occur to me. I don't want to touch them or hold them. I read that kind of work in a flatter, more distanced way, and I see it more critically through the lens of art history. However, when I look at work that presents itself in the world of craft, I am embraced by it in a deeply visceral way. It connects to my body, it connects to my hands, my emotions, much more directly. Its material matters. And so that's another way I hope you'll look at the show. I see the show as a reflection of storytelling. The works are exploring depths of emotion, the search for self, the inheritance of adoption, and an honoring of ancestors. So you'll see, honoring of ancestors in this beautiful book printmaking piece. The idea about adoption, I think the piece might be called Inheritance. It's a vase form that's ceramic, and that's the story of a woman who was adopted as a child, as an infant from China, and she's exploring her Chinese heritage of people that she doesn't know, and the Western European American heritage of the people that raised her. So, that's an example of what I'm talking about. The works are exploring domesticity, observation of place and family, of landscapes real or imagined. They tell us of rituals, of joy, of grief, of losses, and insights found. Another example that I'll point out is a piece called Black Box, which is over in that corner. And in it, and one of the reasons I'm pointing it out in particular, I think that these works emanate these messages. So even though you might not have known that that piece was about a child who was adopted, it's coming as you look at it. This black box piece, I knew that something really emotional was going on there. It was like the vibes were coming off of it, but I wasn't quite sure what it was about. And I did have the privilege of reading all of the artist statements. And they're just so insightful. I'm going to mention that in a minute. But that piece is by someone named Sean Tyler. And I'm going to just read a little sentence of what she had in her artist statement. Black Box contains a series of embroideries based on text messages between myself and a person who sexually assaulted me. The erasures are folded and placed in the box lined with transfers of the messages, ashes of burned mementos, and herbs. So, it's not like we could open that book and unfold the pieces. I mean, even as the curator, I'm not a curator, even as a person behind the scenes here, I didn't do that yesterday. But I'm imagining what would happen if we unfolded those folded up pieces that are within that box form. One artist in the show, Harlan Butt, wrote, it's an exquisitely made enameled urn-like form. He wrote, and this is related to the whole concept of storytelling, I am interested in the stories we tell ourselves and those that have been told throughout history to explain, define, and marvel about what it is to be human. And I think that that's true of every piece in this show. In the lid, and in his application, he wrote a haiku. Now, Harlan has taught at Penland School of Crafts many times, and he always gets his classes to write haikus. So when I saw this haiku and I saw that piece, even though I'm jurying blind, I don't know who any of these applicants are. I thought that one's Harlan. But anyway, his piece says, power and knowledge did not come inside the jar. You put them there. So that's how he incorporates his use of haiku in his work. The artist statements gave me especially meaningful insights into the works themselves, into the thoughtful ways that processes and materials were essential to each artist's own life and their reason for making the works that they're presenting. Even when the final form was more abstract than I could read as a viewer. Going back to that black box piece. Another artist's description is a good example of the power of artist statements. This artist, Vincent Burke, talked about, and his piece is, it's gray and it's ceramic and it's underneath that orange piece. So when you wander around, that's this piece. Vincent Burke talked of cultural, moral, and philosophical systems that once bound us as people together. He said of his work, Blood Memory, I am curious about these systems, their genesis, why they failed, and what springs up to fill the void. My work is a response to these systems and their failures. What looks as if it once belonged to a larger whole, but is now fragmented, partially erased and obscured. There are hints of structure and patterns that may have held some significance, but that meaning is now indeterminate. What's left are the remains, degraded, unbound, a visual metaphor for our time. I would never have seen this exactly, but he was putting words onto a feeling that I was getting from looking at that piece. Rima Day, which is the shirt, camisole-like piece on the wall here, is the last example that I'll use. Her work is called Concealed Desire, and she wrote, thread and textile are surrogates for the human body, to me, because of their softness, translucency, and fragility. I use them to visualize emotions and human connections with an emphasis on hidden or suppressed feelings, emotional wounds, and the depth of human hearts. I embrace the beauty of decay and imperfection. As I stitch, I reflect upon rapid technological advances and globalization, which affect us by diminishing traditional skills, the loss of religion and culture, damage to nature, and changes in the ways in which we communicate with each other. With my needle, I attempt to seek a path through hidden thoughts, repair invisible wounds, and establish connections. I used to want works to stand alone, to speak to the viewer without any labeling. And I've read many artist statements over my 50-plus year career that did not sound authentic. But in this case, all of the statements added to my experience. They reflected a truth about the work and provided me with a deeper understanding. Finally, I want to say, most interesting to me is how these works speak to me about time. I once said time to somebody, and I'm a Southerner, and they thought I was talking about Tom, my husband. So I am saying time. There is the time each artist spent in conceiving and then making the piece, which I believe is evident in the work. But more than that for me, it's how each piece causes time to stand still, and how I can get lost looking and thinking about each of these works. So these explorations are all here for you guys to soak in. I hope you enjoy this show. Thanks.
Again, thank you for everyone who's here. You're in for such a treat. I hope that you are all here earlier for InGrained, and thanks to our friends from InGrained for coming down. We'll have a delightful afternoon together listening to the artists in CraftForms. This is truly my favorite event of the year. I love working with the artists most of the time. Love working with the art. But I really love hearing why you're making what you're making and how you did it. So this is a favorite for me. We're going to move around the room, so you might find that if you're seated, you're going to want to move your chair. That's great. If you're one of our artists, and it would benefit the room for you to, if you can, lift your piece. Jerry, you'll probably want to do that, so that we can see it, right? Danny will want to do that. It would be fabulous to be able to better display it, since the room is so large and there are so many of us in the space. But I think we'll start here, and we're going to invite our first artist to speak, Karen Schultz.
Thank you so much to the Wayne Art Center. I love this venue. It exudes respect for the work. So thank you to all of you who are connected with this beautiful building. And to our juror, and that was a lovely talk, really made me wish I could read all of the artist statement. And I'm not usually the person who does that, so that was great. So I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland, and this is Wabi Sabi. I am ever the formalist, so I always begin with the formal elements of design and what appeals to me visually. It's only through deep involvement with the processes and the materials that content is eventually revealed. I knew I loved this piece the minute I saw it completed. It started out as a whole cloth piece that was cut and reconfigured, but I wasn't sure why. So my son was in the house, and you work alone in your studio, but you don't know what the viewer sees, and the work really isn't finished until the viewer sees it. So I said, could you just go look at the design wall and talk to me? So he went over and he looked, and he looked, and he looked, respectfully. And then he said, kind of reminds me of pond scum, but not in a bad way. And I thought, that's it. That's exactly why I love this piece. I happened to be reading a book about wabi-sabi at the same time, and I'm familiar with the concept, but it was great to read put words to kind of an elusive concept. So these are some of the words. Murky, simple, unpretentious, irregular, earthy, bowl as metaphor, dark and dim, ambiguity. Wabi-sabi embraces the concepts of impermanence, imperfection, and incompleteness. Thank you.
So let's see, I'll begin. The title, Mondo Cane, it just means world dog in Italian. And I got the name just there's no real connection otherwise. I got the name from, there was an Italian orchestra that produced a CD called Mondo Cane. And I like the idea of calling it world dog because it's not about a specific dog, it's not about a specific situation. It's just sort of in this case, the dog is just a stand-in for a series of work I've done based on sort of human manipulation of animals. And so the head is modeled after my own dog, which is a hound, and I wanted to choose a dog that had a very vulnerable and expressive face, and one that I could convey sort of innocence, befuddlement, confusion, those kind of things. I set out to make a park bench or some seating, indoor or outdoor, and I wanted to take this dog and manipulate the rest of the body into this element that looks almost like it was forged. I'm trained as a sculptor and a blacksmith, and my studio is basically a contemporary blacksmithing studio, so a lot of the reference comes from that. It's all just regarding technique. It's all hollow formed with hammers and welded together. It's not cast or anything like that. I wanted to have the animal transform from one end to the next. So the only thing that is sort of anatomically accurate is the very front part, the head and the neck and to some extent the legs. And I wanted to give it a gesture that was sort of like a Art Deco gesture, like a early renditions of robots that were depicted from like Eastern Europe or like Fritz Lang's Metropolis or even like the Oscar Award, that kind of like stiff deco gesture. The chair is just a stand-in as well. Its only purpose is to prop up the one half of the furniture. It's not about sitting against it. It's probably not the most comfortable part of the furniture. I went on the IKEA website and took the most boring and banal dining chair I could find, and I took the exact proportions and size from that. It's not about the chair as a piece of furniture. It's about the chair as an object. Let's see. I finished it with this treatment that is called color shift paint or interference paint. It becomes different colors and different lights. And I just liked the way that worked and thought it was something that gave it a uniform look. I've done a series of these animals over the last few years that, again, is about the overarching theme is about the human interaction with animal human interaction with humans, and often the manipulation of animals by humans. And so I did a series of ravens and a deer and some river otters and that kind of thing. And let's see. I can't think of anything else. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me and including my work in this exhibit. I was so pleased because I am actually see myself for many years as an abstract painter, and that's what I do primarily in my studio, but I was introduced to this technique called Juried, which is an ancient Korean paper manipulation technique. And the process really intrigued me, and I kind of just took off with it, and I've done a lot of work with handmade papers since then. So I took a printmaking course, and I was taught through printmaking how to do this process, which is layering handmade papers in, I guess you'd say, a collage fashion. And I embed lithographic prints in it, so I've done a lot of printmaking from photographs that I've taken of nature, and also using antique photos that are like family photos of my parents who have passed, and like my siblings. So I really have been interested in incorporating, as I've gone along with this process, images of my family and my history. In fact, I did this piece at the very beginning of COVID when I lost my mother, and I was working on my kitchen table. I do have a studio, but I was home for 3 months, and I think it changed my work a lot by adding the images in here, which I'm not sure how well you can see them, but you have to look fairly carefully on both sides, and you will see images of my family and also nature, which I've always been influenced by. But I guess what I love about this technique is that even though I work as a painter, I'm very free and intuitive, and there's really no planning, I have to say. But when I do this work, it is more technical, I guess, but I like the fact that I approach it as a painter and more spontaneously, and I feel like that comes across, that it's both painterly and shows a lot of respect for a traditional craft, which I admire. So to me, it's a merging of techniques, and it really suits me. I just find it very exciting, and it is evolving. This piece was done within 2 years, but I actually work dimensionally as well. So I make the paper piece, which takes many, many, many hours of work and manipulation, and then I actually shape it over chicken wire, which obviously this was not done, but then it gets to be more sculptural. So I'm sort of going in that direction, but I love the fact that this can hang freely and be seen from all around, and the piece is worked on both sides, so it's meant to be really viewed this way. This work has been hung on a wall before, but it's really not as appealing, I think. So I guess that's all for now, and I'm here for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thanks to the wonderful juror and the people here at the Wayne Art Center for staging this and selecting it, and for including some of my pieces. And so I guess I'll talk about this little triptych over here first. Not so little, I guess. These are 3 pieces that go together, and as Pam read, the title of this piece is "We Speak of Slavery in the Past Tense." And the words are really important to me. I put them into each of the carvings that I did in linoleum, because I've just been aware through, reading about various cultures that are part of our country, and things in the news, and I don't know, when things are in the air, you become aware of them, and I've really been made very aware of trafficking. This piece was made first for a show called In Transit, the body as currency. And so to me, that means there, in any way that a person's agency is taken away from them. And so I highlighted in the piece workers who are stuck in a labyrinth of industrial labor that they can never extract themselves from. They can never pay their way out. And children who attempt to work so that they can eventually go to school, but that never happens because that's not the way their system is set up. And finally, in the past tense, I just addressed people, again, who've lost their agency over themselves in ways in our own country's history and world history, and through, you know, on an individual family basis and cultural basis, different ways, but the threads of time bind all of these people together over the centuries. So that's what it's about, and that's why I made it. And what I did, since probably a lot of you don't know anything or much about working with liquid colored paper pulp to make art, that's what I did with both of these triptychs. These pieces are paper that I made in my studio from pulp that I beat in my studio, made from fibers, and that I took pigments and mixed the pigments with various pots of pulp. And I worked with the colored pulps to create the work that you see, the paper work. And then on top of that, I cut three, well, I drew first, of course, and then I cut 3 linoleum plates and printed them, all in my really tiny studio. Move all this out of the way, now we're printing, that kind of thing. It's incredibly labor intensive to make handmade paper, but it's one of those things that I think many crafters understand, that it's not an issue, you just do it. It's what we do, we make stuff. This triptych over here then again is a paper that I made in my studio. Wow. The processes here are pretty complex. I carved a piece of Sintra, which is a plastic material that's sometimes used in etching. I carved Sintra to create rhythmic patterns because these are footprints. And I wanted to show the way that the foot would move as the individual was walking. But the thing is, these individuals walked 1.5 million years ago, 500,000 years ago, different in each case, because these are fossil footprints found in Eastern Africa, where volcanic ash fell on prints that were laid by people, possibly walking, sometimes running. And the conditions were such that today they're being uncovered. And I'm so blown away by the ties we have with our ancient origins, because these are the people that are the ancestors of every single one of us in the world. And I love the fact that we're all related, and if we could get over certain of our stuff, we really are all family. So that's what my work is often about. So I made the handmade paper as I described to you before, and then I printed, but with no ink, just embossed. As I was drying my paper, I embossed a different plate on each of the footprints so that it would have its texture in it. So when you look at them, you'll understand that those are applied in that way. So maybe that explains it a little bit. Thank you very much.
This is my piece right here. And it's a form that's really based on my love of gardening. I like to garden. And last year I planted a gourd seed that I saw in a catalog. And I planted it, and it completely took over not only my yard, but the neighbor's yard. And it grew and grew and grew, and the squirrels loved the gourds. So I didn't get any gourds off of it at all because the squirrels ate every one of the gourds. But I did get to see them, you know, kind of as they were forming. They get up to a certain size, and then they just like disappear. So my love of gardening is kind of the foundation of a lot of what I do. The thing I wanted to talk more than anything else is that I think a really basic quality of doing art is curiosity. And I don't think that it's really recognized as much as it should. Curiosity is really the foundation. The ability, the openness you have of being able to look at the world around you and being able to interpret it and bring it forward. And so as much as I can, I try to be open to myself, to allow myself to have both good and bad things. When you're really curious about stuff and you're trying stuff, you have to be open to the fact you can fail. And being able to kind of incorporate that and still move on is one of the important things to do it. But if you fail occasionally, sometimes you win occasionally. And so that's really important. You can't win all the time, but you can win some of the times. And I like this piece because it incorporates, again, that gourd shape that I saw. The other thing about this that's curious is that this is a hand-built form. It is not thrown on a wheel. I own a wheel in my studio, but it's been a table for about 5 years. In fact, I'm not quite sure even if it's plugged in. But it's I do this basically by making the form, the gourd-shaped form, is basically a cylinder, and then it's darted. In other words, triangles are taken out to make the form. And then the color that you're seeing on this is underglaze, which I developed. One of the only good things I can say about the COVID crisis was the fact I got the opportunity to go to my studio every day. Everything stopped. So, you know, terrible. But it also gave me the kind of opportunity to stop, re-examine what I was doing, and had the time to do the experimenting to develop these colors. So that was also part of the evidence of this. So I'm very interested in form, texture. I very much like line and color in the work, and that's what you're seeing in this. So again, thank you, Wayne, for the opportunity to be here. It's really quite a thrill. Thank you.
I'm thrilled to be here. I've been an artist all my life, mainly painting and pottery. Pottery was very successful. I built my own kilns and made my own glazes and everything, and ended up getting emphysema. Had to give it up. And I thought, how am I going to make my forms? I'd have to do it somehow. And my youngest sister sent me a 3D pen for Christmas that year. And it took me months to get the hang of it. I couldn't figure out what it was doing and how to control it and all that. But I kept seeing potential. I kept seeing, I know I could do something with it. So I kept at it, and my pottery forms, I always threw on the wheel so my pots were symmetrical. And so most of the forms I make are symmetrical. And I usually start at the very bottom, making just a flat shape for the base. And sometimes I spend a month just on the base. And for my story, I've got things that mean something to me about different points in my life. But in art, I love color, I love texture and shape and lines, and this gave me the ability to incorporate all that into my forms that I love to make. I experiment with all different kinds of filaments. The filaments are plant-based plastic. And some of them glow in the dark. This shape up here glows in the dark. And anywhere you see white, if it's in a dark room, it's going to be a bright white. I experiment with wood pulp filaments, matte, shiny, glossy, transparent. I feel like every one of them is an experiment. So I'm just thrilled that they're being recognized. And I love the space, and I'm just so thrilled to be included in this show. Thank you.
My name's Danny Camerath, and I live in Llano County, Texas. Llano County is deep in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, which I'm sure you all knew. Anyway, 15 years ago, my beautiful wife Carol and I were in Dallas, Texas. And there was a pretty good lumber company up there called Woodworld. And one day I was at the Woodworld store looking around, and over in the darkest and dustiest corner of the facility was a little stump of wood. And it caught my eye. And I believe I heard it whisper my name. So I went over and picked it up. It was about that tall and about that big around. And I didn't recognize what kind of wood it was. So I asked the proprietor, and he said that he thought it was poplar, which he said popular. So, like I said, the stump seemed to be talking to me, and it intrigued me. The price was right, so I took it home. And for the next 15 years, it mostly lived in the darkest and dustiest corner of my shop. But from time to time, I'd pick it up, and I'd take it to my bench, and I'd study it, and I might draw on it with a piece of chalk or a crayon, and I'd try to figure out what it was supposed to become. At one point, I was going to carve away about 2 inches of the top up here to reveal a little round table and 4 flat-back chairs, the kind that you'd see in a saloon in an old black and white TV Western. The 3 of the chairs were going to be arranged around the table as they should be, but one of them was going to be laid over on its side on the floor, and I was going to call the piece Frontier Ruckus. But I got distracted before I figured out the procedure how to make it, and the little piece ended up back in the corner. I don't think he wanted to become Frontier Ruckus. Well, anyway, last spring, I was waiting for some glue to dry, and I was walking across my shop, and the little stump caught my eye again, and this time it was screaming at me. And for the first time, I could tell exactly what it wanted to become. So I picked it up, and I took it to my bench, and I started to carve, and this is what was revealed. Now, trees die for a lot of reasons. It could be fire or freeze or flood or drought. Bugs kill a lot of trees, as does fungus and mold. They get wilt, blight. Sometimes a tree stands in the way of development, and it gets cut down. And of course, trees are cut down for lumber. Sometimes those trees are just left to stand, or they're cut to the ground, where they're left to rot, and a lot of times cut up into firewood. But sometimes a piece of wood from a tree ends up in the hands of a woodworker. And when it does, the tree is given a second life. I don't believe in ghosts. And I don't believe in voodoo, and I don't believe in magic. And I don't even believe in Christmas or Santa Claus anymore. But I will tell you, as a woodworker, if you listen to the wood, it will tell you exactly what it wants to become. And I will leave you with this. John Keats wrote that a thing of beauty is a joy forever. A thing of beauty is a joy forever, which is something to keep in mind as you're reaching for your checkbooks.
This is Tank. Tank is a functional, but maybe she shouldn't be functional teapot because she's got better things to do. I have a background in public art, bronze casting, and I've basically worked alone for 2 decades. And in 2021, I decided I really needed to cut loose and find community, so I moved down to Philly. My dog and my husband are still in Massachusetts, but I came to Philly to find community and to sort of get jazzed up again about my art. And through this exploration, I've been doing a lot of work revolving around women and their self-esteem. I myself struggle with that, so I thought it was something that I could explore and communicate with others. I was so excited when a group of women came into my life who are burlesque performers. They're all mothers, they're all in their 30s, maybe late 30s, and they are phenomenal, bold, brassy, courageous women. And they just go out there and they belt out their tunes and they just look amazing. I also am really impressed with young women these days who are owning their bodies. They just blow me away. They have, you know, I have a friend who's under 30, and I asked her, you know, I'm doing these pieces, and I'm curious. She loves them, and she really relates to them. And she said, and I said, so what do you say? Do you say you're full figured? Do you say you're, you know, curvy girl? What do you say? She said, we say we're fat. We own it. We're taking back the word. We're no longer letting people shame us about our bodies, and the word is ours, and we call ourselves fat. And I was like, wow. So I wanted to celebrate these girls. The first thing I did with this, I did a sculpture, Caucasian girl with a bob. She has her Wonder Woman tiara, whatever you would call that. And I made her, I hand-built her out of clay. I came to clay just about 18 months ago, because I've been doing bronze for all that time. And of course, naturally, I wanted to do some mold making, because I thought, well, these things are complicated, and maybe I can make multiples. So I did a hand-built teapot, made a mold. It's a 9-piece mold, so it's 6 pieces on the bottom, 3 pieces on the top. And it gave me the opportunity. I said, you know, we're all Wonder Women, so I want everybody to be able to relate to this. And let's switch it up, and I can do different skin tones through my application of color and underglazes. These are terracotta, so it has a nice rich red color. And with Tank here, Tank is inspired by Tariana Tank Ball from Tank and the Bangers. I don't know if anybody knows this fabulous group of musicians. She's a spoken word poet turned musician. And she just is no holds barred. She's amazing. I also, if you'll see, I'm wearing my Naomi Watanabe face. This is a test tile. Actually, this is a glaze testing tile that I decided to wear today, so that you could see. She's a comedian. She's Taiwanese-Japanese comedian who is also now a fashion icon in Japan. So I have 3 women. It's a limited series. They all have the same bodies. They're all treated different. Their skin tones are treated differently. And I cast the head, but it's very minimally cast. So I have to resculpt the neck to attach it to the body, because it was done at a later date. And the hair and the accessories are different on each girl. Their eyes, their expression, which way they're looking is different on each girl. So no 2 are the same. And I think I've done 7 or 8 now, and there are 4 that are ready for prime time. So it's quite a long, intensive process, but I'm loving it. And I love clay, and I'm so happy to have found it. So thank you.
For 40 years, I've been making sculptural textiles with simple tools. And for this piece, which is done in ply split braiding, this is the tool. It's a wooden needle, and I take the blade of that needle and pass it between the plies of a 4-ply cord and pull a second cord back through the gap created, and do it a few more times. For this object, there were 3 design issues. I wanted to make a 5-handled vase. And I thought I had 3 major decisions I had to make. One regarded the shape, the second regarded the plaid, and the third, the color combination. Much of my work is mathematical in basis, and the shape of this is very much mathematically determined. I started at the bottom, adding 5 cords every row to make a flat bottom that could stand up. But to make the steeply sloped sides, I had to cut the rate of addition of cords in half to 2.5 cords per row up the side until I got right below the handles, and I dropped the rate further to 0 cords per row to make straight sides. Then I needed the in-folding shoulders. To do that, I had to remove 5 cords per row and take those cords I removed and make the straps from them. So that's the shape. To get the plaid, some of this plaid is pretty easy to read. It's orthogonal. Horizontal and vertical, as you'd expect from the plaid. Some is on the diagonal on the handles. But there's some that is very hard to read, these deep V's. It's not at all clear, if you haven't done this work, how one would do that. But it all comes out of where I add the cords and how I add the cords. And then last, the color combinations. I've made a pot this shape in contrasting colors, and I wanted to bring the color palette very tightly close together to have fundamentally a purple background, but the red and blue arguing with each other on either side of it. Thank you very much.
I have, through the course of my life, been powerfully influenced by nature and animals. In fact, I believe that I relate to the world because of animals. Nature was my sanctuary early on, and so all I do are animals. That's all I work with, my subject. For 10 years I worked in bronze. For 12 I worked in assemblage, where I'm collecting found materials, man-made and natural, and was incorporating them. And in the last 10 years or so, I've been working in fired clay, where I'm back to the figure and incorporating materials that sometimes are really disparate, trying to figure out how to get them to marry, but largely using these a secondary material to help tell a richer story. My current body of work is focused on critically endangered animals, and this is actually a small study for what I hope to be a life-size piece at one point in time. So I've got a lot to learn about glass. This is a porcelain piece, and the glass is cast glass. It's actually quite heavy, and if you know anything about porcelain, it's very light and very delicate. And so incorporating the two materials, getting them to marry well structurally, was quite a challenge, although viscerally they just felt right when I imagined this piece. And initially this started a couple of years ago, actually. I was doing a portrait of an individual elephant with a very different intention. But I got very busy with some work and had to step away from it for some other work, so I stepped away from that project. And when I came back, there were a number of things that were happening for me, and the idea of taking that form and working it in porcelain and glass completely changed what I was looking at. So initially I had all of the wrinkles articulated because it was an individual. And I removed the wrinkles and worked with this sleek form because I wanted it to feel kind of lifted. And I felt that the wrinkles might be a little too much, at least this scale for sure. And yeah, that's Apparition. And oh, I have to say that 12 years ago, I was in a CraftForms show while I was teaching here at Wayne, and I was so impressed with that show. I actually bought one of my first really treasured pieces of artwork. I mean, I've had paintings and sculptures, but like this beautiful dragon pot I was just in love with. And I thought, man, what a show. Never thought my work would apply to a craft show. But when I moved to porcelain and glass, I was like, you know, this might be the time. And so I'm really happy to be here. Beautiful work.